Have you ever sat at your kitchen table, staring into your cup of coffee, wondering when the child you once tucked into bed and kissed goodnight grew into someone who barely looks at you with warmth? You remember their small hands reaching for yours, the way they used to laugh at your stories, and now those same eyes roll when you speak. The words that come from their mouth feel sharper than they should, leaving you hurt and questioning where things went wrong. It's one of the hardest truths of aging, that sometimes the love and sacrifice of decades is met not with gratitude, but with indifference or even contempt. If this has been your experience, I want you to know you are not alone. Countless parents in their 60s, 70s, and beyond carry the same invisible wound. They ask the same questions in silence, often blaming themselves, when the truth is this is a burden many elders share. This video is not here to stir up anger or to weigh you down with guilt. Instead, it is here to offer strength, clarity, and compassion. Because at this stage of life, your peace matters. Your dignity matters. And you deserve relationships that honor both of you. When we reach our later years, we often hope that the children we raised will see us with the same tenderness we once poured into them. We imagine conversations filled with gratitude, Sunday dinners where laughter feels easy, and the kind of closeness that softens the edges of aging. But for many parents, the reality doesn't look like that. Instead, there are moments of tension, sharp words that cut more deeply than they should, and a coldness that leaves you questioning what happened to the little boy or girl who once clung to your hand. If you've felt that sting, you know how disorienting it can be. You gave love, you gave years of your life, and yet somehow the response you receive now is indifference, criticism, or even open disrespect. It can shake your confidence and leave you carrying an invisible weight. The truth is that disrespect from an adult child is not simply a reflection of your worth as a parent. It's not always a mirror of how much you gave or how deeply you loved. Sometimes it's about them, their own struggles, their own immaturity, their own inability to handle the challenges of adulthood with grace. And that brings us to the first point worth remembering. Maturity isn't automatic. Maturity isn't automatic. For many people, there's an assumption that once someone turns 18 or 21, they instantly transform into a fully developed adult, wise enough to treat others with fairness and respect. But you and I both know that's not how life works. Age alone does not guarantee wisdom. The truth is that some people carry immaturity with them far into adulthood. They might be responsible when it comes to paying bills or managing their careers, but when it comes to relationships, especially with their parents, they revert to patterns that feel more like adolescence than adulthood. You may find yourself dealing with eye-rolling, dismissive tones, or sarcastic remarks that echo the behavior of a teenager. And when this comes from your child, the very person you nurtured, it can feel like a betrayal. But here's the important thing. Their immaturity is not your fault. It doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you didn't love them enough or teach them enough. Sometimes people simply grow older without growing up. This is why blaming yourself is not only unfair, but it's also unhelpful. When you internalize their disrespect as proof of your shortcomings, you place yourself in a cycle of guilt that serves no one. Instead, it's essential to see their behavior for what it is, a reflection of where they are in their own emotional development. They may still have lessons to learn, and sometimes those lessons only come when a parent finally says, "I will not be treated this way anymore." Boundaries are love. Now, let's talk about something many parents struggle with: boundaries. For a generation that grew up believing that sacrifice was the highest form of love, the idea of setting boundaries with your own child can feel unnatural, even selfish. You may have spent decades putting your children's needs before your own, giving up personal time, energy, and resources because that's what you believed a good parent should do. And yet, if you continue to live without boundaries even when your children are grown, you end up sacrificing your own well-being in ways that are not healthy for anyone. Boundaries are not walls designed to shut people out. They are gates that you control. They define what behavior is acceptable in your presence and what is not. When you say to your child, "I love you, but I will not tolerate being spoken to with disrespect," you are not pushing them away. You are actually inviting them into a healthier relationship, one where love is tied to mutual respect rather than blind loyalty. Think of it this way. When children are young, you teach them not to run into the street, not because you want to limit their freedom, but because you love them enough to protect them. Boundaries in adulthood work the same way. When you set limits on how your grown child may treat you, you're not being cruel, you're teaching them. You're modeling what healthy relationships look like, even if they resist at first. And over time, many children, even the most stubborn, begin to understand that love has requirements, and respect is one of them. It's also important to recognize that boundaries are not about punishment. They are about preservation. They preserve your peace, your dignity, and your health. When you allow constant criticism, manipulation, or disrespect to enter your life unchecked, you carry the burden of that negativity in your body and soul. It can affect your sleep, your mood, and even your physical health. By setting boundaries, you are telling yourself and your child that you value your well-being enough to protect it. That is not selfish. That is love. Love for yourself and love for them, because it teaches them responsibility for their actions. Reclaiming emotional space. One of the hardest parts about dealing with a disrespectful adult child is the way their words linger. A sharp comment during a phone call can echo in your mind for days. A dismissive gesture during a visit can sit heavily on your chest long after they've walked out the door. It's natural to replay those moments, to wonder what you could have done differently, or to sink into silence carrying hurt that no one else can see. But there is another way. Reclaiming your emotional space begins with remembering that you cannot always control how others speak to you, but you can always control how you respond. That shift, from trying to manage their behavior to managing your own response, is powerful. It puts you back in the driver's seat of your emotional life. Imagine this. Your son comes over and immediately begins criticizing the way you live. He doesn't like the food in your fridge, the way you decorate your home, or the fact that you still prefer writing checks over paying with your phone. It would be easy to feel small, defensive, or ashamed. But instead of defending yourself, what if you calmly said, "I appreciate your concern, but this is my home, and I live in a way that makes me comfortable." That one sentence accomplishes something remarkable. It acknowledges his concern without inviting an argument. It asserts your right to live your life on your terms, and it makes clear that his criticism does not define your worth. This is the essence of reclaiming emotional space. You step out of the chaos of their words and stand firmly in your own dignity. You no longer let their storms dictate your peace. Instead, you become the anchor, the steady presence that refuses to be pulled into unnecessary conflict. Of course, this is easier said than done. There will be moments when your child's words sting so deeply that silence feels impossible. There will be times when your natural instinct is to fight back, to argue, or to retreat into guilt. But with practice, you can learn to pause. You can take a breath, remind yourself that their words do not define you, and choose a response that reflects the strength you've built over a lifetime. Think of all the storms you've weathered in your years. Losses, hardships, sacrifices. You have survived them all. You have endured more than many people will ever know. Why should a few disrespectful words undo all of that strength? They shouldn't. And when you reclaim your emotional space, you remind both yourself and your child that you are more than the recipient of their moods. You are a whole person worthy of respect. Pulling the threads together. When we put these ideas side by side, a clearer picture emerges. First, maturity isn't automatic. Just because your child has grown taller, older, and perhaps even more successful in certain areas, that does not mean they've mastered the art of treating others with kindness. Their immaturity is not proof of your failure. Second, boundaries are an expression of love, not selfishness. By setting them, you preserve not only your own peace but also the possibility of a healthier relationship. And third, reclaiming your emotional space allows you to respond with dignity rather than being controlled by every word or action that comes your way. This shift, from guilt to clarity, from chaos to composure, can change everything. It doesn't mean your child will instantly become respectful. Some may resist, some may even withdraw for a while. But over time, many parents find that when they stand firm in their dignity, the relationship begins to shift. Disrespectful behavior becomes less frequent because it no longer produces the reaction the child expects. And even if your child doesn't change, you have changed. You have stepped into a place of strength where your well-being no longer depends on their moods. There's a deep freedom in this. A freedom that comes from realizing that while you cannot control the choices of your adult child, you can control the environment you create for yourself. You can fill your days with peace rather than tension, with dignity rather than despair. You can choose to surround yourself with people who lift you up instead of those who tear you down. And when you do, you remind yourself that your life is still your own to shape, regardless of how your children behave. For many elders, this realization is a turning point. They stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" and start asking, "What do I want the rest of my life to feel like?" That simple shift changes everything. Takes the focus off of blame and puts it back on choice. Choice, your power, your dignity. So, if you've been struggling with a disrespectful adult child, I want you to take a deep breath. Remind yourself that their immaturity is not a reflection of your failure. Allow yourself to see boundaries as an act of love, not rejection. And most importantly, reclaim the emotional space that belongs to you. Because you are worthy of peace. You are worthy of respect. And no matter how others choose to act, you can choose to carry yourself with the quiet strength that has always defined you. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Life has a way of testing the strength we didn't even know we had. For many parents in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, one of the deepest tests doesn't come from illness or from financial struggles. It comes from the very children they raised. When a grown son or daughter begins to speak with cruelty, dismissiveness, or control, it pierces the heart in a way no stranger could. But sometimes, in those very moments of pain, wisdom begins to bloom. Real parents, real stories, show us what happens when elders finally decide that they deserve better, and when they summon the quiet courage to say, "Enough." These stories aren't just lessons in boundaries. They are living examples of how love, when paired with strength, can transform relationships. They remind us that no matter how old we are, it is never too late to claim our dignity and to teach others how to treat us. Carol's story. Carol had spent most of her life giving. She was a single mother who raised her daughter with nothing but grit and determination. There were years when she worked 2 jobs, coming home bone-tired but still cooking dinner, still sitting at the kitchen table to help with homework, still clapping loudly at every school recital, even if her feet ached from standing all day. She carried the weight of responsibility alone, believing that her sacrifices would one day be honored with love and gratitude. But as her daughter grew into adulthood, something shifted. Instead of appreciation, Carol was met with hostility. Phone calls would come late at night, filled not with affection but with anger. Her daughter would accuse her of not doing enough, of failing to meet impossible expectations. Sometimes the calls would end with Carol in tears, clutching the phone like it was a lifeline, only to realize it was slowly strangling her peace. For years, she tolerated it. She told herself that being a mother meant endless forgiveness, that perhaps if she listened harder or gave more, her daughter would finally soften. But the opposite happened. The more Carol gave, the harsher her daughter became. The disrespect grew into a pattern, and Carol's self-worth began to crumble under the weight of guilt. One evening, after a particularly brutal call, Carol sat in the quiet of her small living room. The walls that had once echoed with her daughter's laughter now felt like a prison. She thought about all the years she had sacrificed, the birthdays she had worked through, the vacations she never took, the dreams she had set aside. For the first time, she asked herself a question that changed everything. When did I agree that love meant being treated this way? The next time her daughter called and began to unleash the usual storm of criticism, Carol did something different. She took a breath, steadied her voice, and said, "I love you, but I will not let you speak to me that way anymore." Then, before her daughter could argue, she ended the call. Her hands trembled. Her heart raced. For a moment, she doubted herself. Was she being cold? Was she betraying her role as a mother? But deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't rejection, it was protection. It was an act of love, both for herself and for her daughter, who desperately needed to learn that cruelty was not the language of family. The weeks that followed were painful. Her daughter stopped calling. Silence replaced the late-night tirades. Carol cried herself to sleep more than once, feeling both liberated and abandoned. But slowly, something began to change. The silence gave her daughter space to reflect. When she finally did reach out, the tone was different. It wasn't perfect, old habits die hard, but there was hesitation in her voice, a new awareness that the old tactics no longer worked. Over time, with consistency and quiet strength, Carol rebuilt the relationship on new terms. Her daughter learned that access to her mother's heart required respect. Carol, for the first time in decades, felt a sense of peace she hadn't known since her daughter was a little girl. She realized that saying no to disrespect had opened the door to a healthier yes. A yes to love with dignity. Robert's story. Robert was the kind of man people admired. He had spent his life working steadily, building a home, raising his children with discipline and warmth. Widowed in his late 60s, he found himself alone but determined to maintain his independence. He drove himself to church every Sunday, managed his finances carefully, and still enjoyed tending to the small garden behind his house. But his daughter, worried about his age, began to cross a line. What started as occasional check-ins grew into a pattern of control. She would show up unannounced, rifle through his paperwork, criticize his spending habits, and lecture him about selling the family home. She told him he shouldn't be driving anymore, shouldn't be living alone, shouldn't be making decisions without her approval. At first, Robert tolerated it, telling himself that her concern came from love. But the more she treated him like a child, the more he felt his dignity slipping away. He found himself second-guessing decisions he had once made with confidence. He felt small in his own home, as if his life belonged more to her than to him. One afternoon, after she stormed into his house demanding to know why he hadn't answered her texts, Robert felt something inside him snap. He listened quietly as she scolded him, her voice rising with every sentence, until finally he stood up. His voice, steady and firm, carried the weight of decades of fatherhood. "I raised you to be strong and independent," he said, "but I haven't stopped being that myself. I value your care, but I need you to treat me with respect. Let's find a way to talk to each other like adults." The room fell silent. His daughter, shocked by the directness of his words, struggled to respond. For years, she had assumed that her father's quiet tolerance meant acceptance. But now, faced with his unshakable dignity, she had to confront the reality that her behavior was not love, it was control. It wasn't easy. There were difficult conversations, moments of tension, even arguments. But Robert held his ground. He welcomed her concern but rejected her dominance. Slowly, their relationship began to shift. She learned to knock before entering his home. She asked instead of demanding. She spoke with a tone of respect rather than command. And Robert, for the first time since his wife's passing, felt like his life was truly his own again. What Robert discovered was simple but profound. Love cannot flourish where control takes root. By demanding respect, he didn't lose his daughter. He gained a healthier bond, one built on mutual recognition rather than power. His story is a reminder that no matter your age, you have the right to be treated as an equal in your own family. The phone rule. Not all boundaries are as dramatic as ending a late-night tirade or confronting a controlling daughter. Sometimes, boundaries are as straightforward as a single rule. A rule that, when enforced consistently, changes everything. There was a woman, well into her 70s, whose son had a habit of cursing at her during phone calls. Whenever he grew frustrated or wanted to push her into doing something, he would unleash a stream of profanity, using words that cut far deeper than he realized. For years, she endured it. She told herself he didn't really mean it, that it was just the way he spoke when he was angry. But each call left her shaken, her heart heavy with hurt. One day, after hanging up the phone in tears, she decided she had had enough. She wrote down a rule on a small piece of paper and placed it next to her phone. If he curses, the call ends. Simple, clear, non-negotiable. The next time her son called and began his usual tirade, she calmly interrupted and said, "I don't accept being spoken to that way. I'm ending the call now." And she hung up. Minutes later, he called back, furious. He accused her of being dramatic, of not listening, of abandoning him in his frustration. But she held firm. The rule was clear. If he cursed, the call ended. The second time it happened, she repeated the process. Calm voice, no lecture, just a quiet goodbye. By the third time, something shifted. He began to catch himself before letting the words fly. He adjusted his tone, realizing that if he wanted access to his mother, respect was required. This small rule did more than stop the profanity. It redefined the relationship. It taught him that his mother was no longer a silent punching bag for his emotions. It reminded him that love, even between parent and child, demands civility. For the woman, the transformation was even greater. She no longer dreaded phone calls. She no longer carried the weight of his words for days afterward. She reclaimed her power with a single boundary and, in doing so, restored peace to her days. Threads of wisdom. These three stories, Carol's late-night stand, Robert's declaration of dignity, and the quiet strength of the phone rule, may look different on the surface, but they all carry the same message. Respect is not optional. Boundaries are not selfish. And peace is not a luxury reserved for the young. It is a birthright for every stage of life. What makes these examples so powerful is that they come from real, ordinary people who decided they had endured enough. They didn't wait for their children to change on their own. They didn't continue to sacrifice their well-being in the name of endless forgiveness. They chose instead to step into their strength, to define the terms of their relationships, and to reclaim their lives. And here's the remarkable truth. In many cases, the children do change. When faced with a parent who calmly but firmly demands respect, many adult children begin to see their behavior in a new light. They may resist at first. They may push back. But over time, they learn that cruelty no longer gets rewarded. And slowly, respect begins to take its place. Of course, not every story ends in reconciliation. Some children remain distant, bitter, or resistant to growth. But even in those cases, the parent gains something priceless: peace. The knowledge that they no longer have to endure abuse, that they no longer have to sacrifice their dignity for the sake of maintaining an illusion of harmony. That peace is worth more than any hollow closeness built on disrespect. So, what can we learn from Carol, Robert, and the woman with the phone rule? We learn that boundaries, when set with love, have the power to transform. We learn that dignity, once reclaimed, is contagious. It teaches others how to treat us. And most importantly, we learn that it is never too late to stand tall. Whether you are 65, 75, or 85, your worth has not expired. Your voice still matters. And the love you give deserves to be returned with respect. There comes a time in every parent's life when the hardest battles are no longer about putting food on the table, paying the mortgage, or getting the kids to school on time. The hardest battles, in the later years, are often the ones fought quietly in the heart. They are battles of dignity, of boundaries, of deciding how much disrespect one will allow from the very children they once carried. And perhaps the greatest challenge of all is figuring out how to protect your peace without losing the love you still hold. It is possible. In fact, it is necessary. Peace in old age is not a luxury. It is survival, it is wisdom, it is the gift you owe yourself after decades of giving. The strategies that follow are not about controlling your child. They are about reclaiming your life. They are about standing tall even when words are sharp, about loving without losing yourself, about teaching with boundaries rather than lectures. These are the tools that can transform chaos into clarity. Detach with love. The phrase sounds almost contradictory. How do you detach from someone you love more than life itself? Isn't a parent supposed to hold on, to forgive endlessly, to absorb every blow for the sake of family? That is what many of us were taught. Yet the truth is, holding on too tightly, especially when the relationship has turned toxic, doesn't heal anyone. It only deepens the wounds. Detaching with love does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you turn cold or slam the door on your child forever. It means you step back from the drama and chaos without letting bitterness poison your heart. It is the act of saying, "I love you, but I will not let your storms sink my ship." Imagine a mother whose son constantly calls to unload his anger. Every conversation ends with her in tears, her chest tight with anxiety. Detachment for her looks like not answering the phone when she knows he's in a rage. It looks like waiting until she feels emotionally grounded before returning the call. It looks like shortening conversations when his words turn cruel, not because she doesn't love him, but because she loves herself enough to stop the bleeding. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment, too, below to let me know that you are still here with me. Detaching with love is not abandonment, it's wisdom. It protects your heart from carrying burdens that were never yours to begin with. And sometimes, it even gives your child the space to face their own behavior without you cushioning the consequences. One of the most powerful shifts happens when a parent stops trying to fix the relationship through sacrifice and starts protecting their own spirit. When you detach with love, you are not walking away from your child, you are walking toward peace. And that peace, in time, can become the very soil where a healthier connection might grow. Guilt is not love. If there is one weapon many adult children know how to wield, it is guilt. They know the words that cut deepest. You were never there for me. You owe me. If you really loved me, you would. Those phrases, heavy with accusation, pierce straight through the heart of a parent who has already spent decades questioning whether they did enough. But here's the truth that too few parents hear. Guilt is not the same as love. Love builds up, guilt tears down. Love brings people closer, guilt pushes them apart. And no child, no matter how grown, has the right to manipulate a parent's heartstrings as though affection were a debt to be collected. When guilt enters the conversation, it's important to pause and ask yourself, is this guilt based on truth or on their unmet expectations? Too often, parents accept guilt as proof that they failed when, in reality, it is a tool their child uses to control them. Think of the years you showed up, through sickness, through long workdays, through sacrifice no one else even saw. Did you make mistakes? Of course. Every parent does. But chances are, your ledger of love is far fuller than your child remembers. To let guilt erase a lifetime of devotion is to hand over your worth to someone else's narrative. A powerful response in those moments is simple. I'm sorry you feel that way. That wasn't my intention. This statement acknowledges their feelings but does not bow to the weight of false guilt. It places responsibility back where it belongs, on them. Liberating yourself from guilt is one of the most healing steps you can take. Because once you recognize that love cannot be measured by endless self-sacrifice, you reclaim your ability to love freely, without resentment. And when guilt no longer controls you, you can show up in your child's life with authenticity instead of obligation. Respect has requirements. One of the most damaging myths many parents believe is that love means unlimited access. That no matter how badly a child behaves, no matter how many times they lash out or belittle, they are still entitled to the same closeness and intimacy as before. This belief, though noble in intent, is dangerous in practice. Because love without limits becomes enabling. And enabling breeds abuse. Respect has requirements. It is not given blindly. It is earned and maintained through behavior. Just as you would not allow a stranger to scream insults in your home, you are not obligated to allow it from your child. The family bond is sacred, but it does not excuse cruelty. Think of it this way. When a child was young, you taught them that hitting was not acceptable, that lying carried consequences, and that kindness mattered. Why should adulthood erase those lessons? If anything, the older we get, the more vital it becomes to demand respect. When your adult child acts with consistent rudeness, manipulation, or selfishness, it is not your duty to endure it in silence. You can love someone deeply and still deny them front-row access to your life if they cannot meet the basic requirements of respect. One father once put it this way, I raised my children to know right from wrong. If they choose wrong, I don't stop loving them. But I also don't invite wrong into my home. That perspective holds great wisdom. Love does not mean turning a blind eye. Love means holding space for growth while protecting yourself from harm. And here's the unexpected truth. Sometimes, when a parent finally sets the standard, the child begins to rise to meet it. Because deep down, many children who act out do so because they know they can get away with it. When they realize that the price of disrespect is distance, they may begin to see that love without respect is no love at all. Boundaries as silent teachers. Words can be powerful, but actions speak louder. And one of the most effective teachers in a strained relationship is the quiet consistency of a boundary. You don't need to lecture, yell, or issue long explanations. You simply set the rule, and you follow it. Over time, the lesson teaches itself. Consider the mother who decided that if her son cursed at her on the phone, the call would end immediately. No drama, no warning, just a calm goodbye. The first time, he exploded with anger. The second time, he tried again. But by the third, he understood. The calls changed because his mother had changed. Boundaries, enforced calmly and consistently, create a new reality. They shift the dynamic from chaos to clarity. They show your child, without a single lecture, that respect is the currency of access. And slowly, they adapt. It's important to remember that boundaries are not punishment. They are not meant to push people away. They are fences with gates, where you decide who enters and under what conditions. They keep out the weeds so that love has room to grow. And while your child may resist at first, calling you stubborn, accusing you of being cold, the truth is, those boundaries may be the very thing that teaches them maturity. Because when they see that their actions have consequences, when they realize that cruelty closes doors instead of opening them, they are faced with a choice: change or remain outside the gate. For many parents, this is the hardest step, because it requires consistency. But it is also the most transformative. Boundaries, over time, not only protect your peace, they shape your child's behavior. They are the silent teachers that words alone could never be. Weaving the strategies together. Detach with love. Release the weight of guilt. Remember that respect has requirements. Let boundaries be the silent teachers. When woven together, these strategies create a fabric of peace strong enough to withstand the storms of disrespect. They remind you that you are not powerless, no matter how hurtful your child's behavior may be. They remind you that your worth is not up for debate. And they remind you that, even in your later years, you still have the authority to decide how you will be treated. For some parents, these tools restore broken relationships. For others, they bring peace even in the absence of reconciliation. But in every case, they return something priceless: the freedom to live the rest of your life with dignity. Because at this stage, peace is more valuable than control, joy is more nourishing than guilt, and dignity is more important than blind loyalty. You do not need to earn respect, it is already yours. And when you claim it, you teach not only your children but yourself that love, at its best, is never about suffering in silence. It is about honoring your heart, protecting your spirit, and choosing peace again and again. There comes a moment in every parent's journey when you realize that the greatest transformation doesn't happen in your child, it happens in you. For years, you may have believed that your happiness was tied to the way your son or daughter treated you, that your peace depended on whether the phone rang, whether the visit was pleasant, and whether they offered a kind word. But the truth is, building your life around the unpredictable behavior of another person, even your own child, robs you of the joy you've earned. This stage of life is not about waiting by the window for an apology that may never come. It is not about twisting yourself into knots, trying to be enough for someone who refuses to see your worth. This stage is about reclaiming what has always been yours: peace, dignity, joy, and the right to live as more than just a parent. Reclaiming peace. Peace is not something handed to you. It is something you choose, day after day, sometimes hour by hour. For parents of disrespectful adult children, the temptation to argue, to explain, to fight for recognition is overwhelming. When the words come sharp and dismissive, you may feel the urge to defend yourself, to remind them of everything you've given, to prove that you are worthy of their kindness. But often, that fight only leaves you drained and unheard. Reclaiming peace begins with a simple but powerful decision. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Silence is not weakness. Walking away is not surrender. It is the act of protecting your spirit from battles that were never yours to fight. Imagine this. Your grown child begins criticizing your choices yet again. Your finances, your habits, the way you live your life. Instead of explaining, instead of arguing, you take a breath and say calmly, "I hear your concern, but this is my life, and I'm comfortable with my decisions." Then, rather than continuing down a road of conflict, you step back. You refuse to be pulled into a debate designed to drain your dignity. This kind of peace is not passive. It is active, intentional, and fiercely protective. It's reminding yourself that you've lived through wars of your own, financial struggles, losses, heartbreaks, and you deserve to spend these years with serenity, not with constant conflict. Reclaiming peace also means filling your days with what soothes and strengthens you. Maybe it's gardening in the quiet morning light. Maybe it's reading novels that take you to places you'll never visit. Maybe it's sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to the wind move through the trees. Peace is not only about avoiding conflict, it is about creating moments that restore your soul. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Emotional reset. Sometimes, the relationship with an adult child feels like a constant cycle. Hope, disappointment, conflict, guilt, repeat. The pattern is exhausting, like walking the same broken road over and over, hoping it will lead somewhere new. An emotional reset is the decision to stop walking that road and instead choose a different path. Resetting doesn't mean erasing love or cutting ties in bitterness. It means asking yourself, what do I want the rest of my life to feel like? That question is powerful because it shifts the focus from what your child refuses to give to what you can create for yourself. For some parents, an emotional reset means limiting contact to short, respectful conversations rather than long, draining interactions. For others, it means giving space, a season of distance that allows wounds to heal instead of being reopened again and again. For many, it means letting go of the fantasy child, the version you dreamed of, who would call often, visit joyfully, and treat you with affection. Releasing that fantasy is painful, almost like grief. But it also frees you to accept reality as it is, and to build your joy outside of what your child chooses. An emotional reset also means reclaiming ownership of your narrative. Instead of saying, my son never calls, so my life feels empty, you begin to say, my son may not call, but I choose to spend my time with people who value me. Instead of thinking, my daughter's harsh words ruin my week, you say, her words are hers to carry, not mine. My peace belongs to me. This reset is not easy. It takes courage to admit that you cannot control someone else's choices. But the freedom it brings is profound. It allows you to stop replaying the same painful cycle and to start designing the kind of days you want to live. And once you reset, you may find that your child either rises to meet the new standard, or fades into the background while you thrive without the constant sting of their disrespect. You are more than a parent. For decades, your identity may have been defined by the words mom or dad. It's who you were from the moment you first held your child in your arms. Every decision, every sacrifice, every late night and early morning revolved around them. And while that role was sacred, it was never meant to be the sum total of your existence. You are more than a parent. You are a person with talents, interests, friendships, and dreams that still matter, no matter your age. Too often, parents in their later years shrink their world to the size of their child's approval. They wait for the phone to ring, for the knock at the door, for the invitation to dinner. But what if, instead of waiting, you chose to expand your world again? Think of the hobbies you once loved but set aside. Did you play an instrument, paint, write, or sew? Did you enjoy fishing, traveling, or learning new skills? Those passions are still waiting for you. They can still bring joy, connection, and meaning into your life. Think of the friendships that may have faded while you were busy raising children. What would it feel like to reconnect with an old friend, to share a meal with someone who appreciates you without condition? Community doesn't end with family. It extends to neighbors, church groups, clubs, and new connections that can blossom even in your 70s or 80s. You are also more than the limits of age. Yes, the body may slow down. Yes, there may be aches where there were none before. But there is also wisdom, resilience, and freedom that younger years never knew. You have the chance now to live for yourself in a way that was impossible when you were responsible for everyone else. Being more than a parent means granting yourself permission to enjoy your own life. To go to the concert. To take the painting class. To volunteer at the local library. To laugh with friends until your sides ache. To sit in the sun and feel, without guilt, that this moment is yours. And here's the secret. When you begin to live as more than a parent, something shifts in your relationship with your child, too. They see you not just as a figure to lean on or to criticize, but as a full person who commands respect. Your joy becomes a quiet reminder that you are not defined by their moods. You are defined by your own choices. Weaving it all together. Reclaiming peace, pressing reset, and remembering that you are more than a parent. These are not just strategies. They are transformations. They turn a life of waiting, worrying, and suffering into a life of choice, dignity, and joy. When you reclaim peace, you refuse to let arguments define your days. When you reset emotionally, you stop walking the same painful cycle and choose a new path. And when you embrace your identity beyond parenthood, you unlock doors to fulfillment that may have been closed for years. The truth is, the transformation isn't about changing your child, it's about changing the way you live in response to them. You cannot control whether they call, whether they speak with kindness, or whether they show up the way you wish they would. But you can control the way you respond. You can choose peace over chaos, self-worth over guilt, joy over resentment. And sometimes, When parents begin to live this way, their children notice. They see the calm strength, the quiet dignity, the refusal to be dragged into old patterns. And in some cases, that example becomes the very lesson that inspires change. But even if it doesn't, you win. Because your happiness is no longer at the mercy of someone else's behavior. At this stage of life, your legacy is not just in how your children treat you. It is in how you choose to live despite how they treat you. It is in your resilience, your ability to find beauty in the small things, your determination to protect your spirit. You are proof that joy is not reserved for the young, that it can bloom at any age, even after pain, even after disappointment. So step into this transformation boldly. Reclaim your peace. Reset your heart. Live as more than a parent. Because you are not just someone's mother or father. You are a person of worth, of wisdom, of dignity. And the rest of your life, whether it is 5 years, 15 years, or 30 years, deserves to be filled with laughter, light, and love that honors who you are. In the end, what defines your life is not the sharpness of your child's words or the silence that sometimes hangs between phone calls. Your legacy is not written in their moods or their choices. Your legacy is strength, the quiet kind that carried you through long nights, the steady kind that built a home, the resilient kind that kept loving even when love was not returned in the way you hoped. That strength is yours, and it remains the mark you leave on this world. It is time, too, to let go of guilt. For too many years, parents carry the heavy question, did I do enough? But the truth is, you did. You showed up in ways your child may never remember. Packing lunches, working late shifts, standing in the crowd at graduations, offering guidance when no one else did. No parent is perfect, but perfection was never the requirement. Love was. And you gave it again and again. You have done enough. You are enough. So as you take these lessons to heart, I invite you to share your own story. Your words may be the very lifeline another parent needs to hear tonight. Leave a comment below, let your voice be heard, and know that this is a community where your experience matters. And if this message has touched you, I encourage you to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with others who may need strength and encouragement. Because you deserve to live with dignity, with peace, and with joy. And together, we can remind each other that even in the later chapters of life, there is always hope, always healing, and always the chance to rise stronger.